Hey there, real quick before we start. This video has a written version that is linked in the description below if reading is a more accessible option for you, or if a screen reader is more comprehensive than my own voice. With that said, let's get into the essay. I never did finish watching Serial Experiments Lane. At some point in my life amidst the cacophony that was my mid to late teens, Lane, most likely viewed in parts on YouTube in 480p, found its way to me. I can't ever remember watching Lane is the thing. Maybe it was just because it happened during a period of my life that I'd rather not remember, with only a persistent echo of present day, present time permeating the brick wall that had, for whatever reason, been built around me. The mystery of why the anime had stuck with me for so long was something that would only start to unravel after a rewatch back in 2022. I'd found a DVD of the entire series on eBay and bought it immediately. I saw it as a piece of artistic, thought-provoking animation history that I couldn't wait to sit down with and prod out with a magnifying glass. Armed with a notebook and exactly zero knowledge of any of the themes surrounding its narrative, I plopped myself on the bed, put in the DVD, and started my long-awaited rewatch. I couldn't get more than 5 or 6 episodes in. It's been so long that, like before, I can't recall the time that I spent with Lane. I only remember the choking sensation in my throat, the sting to my widened eyes that had long since forgotten to blink, and what felt like a hand tightly wrapped around my heart. Lane's isolation, her awkwardness, the treatment of her by her peers, and above all else, her steadily declining sense of self in the face of uncertainty and confusion hit me in a way that I wasn't ready for. As Lane buried herself more and more into her carefully crafted world of wires and screens, it felt like the tug of a small hand against my pant leg. My younger self, asleep for so long at the other side of the brick wall, was pointing at the screen, at me, at us, and as I desperately tried to process the funhouse mirrors wrapped around me, I also had to contend with the quiet, earnest inquiry that was presented. Who is that? I stopped taking notes. I stopped watching Lane, and I started on a fresh batch of mortar for my bricks. Time passed, a year, maybe. I was searching on the sales page on the Switch's eShop and found something called Milk Outside a Bag of Milk Outside a Bag of Milk. The art style looked interesting, so I bought it and played through it as well as its prequel. Like with Lane, it had a vice grip on me from the moment I started experiencing it, but I still didn't have the language to explain why. I saw myself in Milk-chan much like I did with Lane Iwakura, but chalked it up to depressed androgynous character in an oversized shirt and little else. To look further was to have that little hand squeezing my chest again. Serial Experiments Lane and Milk Outside Bag of Milk are only 2 examples of media that has resonated with me in ways that felt like a stark reflection of the self. The concept of isolation, a desperation for individuality but a crushing loss upon realizing that your situation cannot foster the growth of such, and even things like a low, droning soundtrack or empty air were enough to crawl under my skin and settle in there for years. I look at other characters I've related to over the years and find more similarities than I was previously open to recognizing. Gamzee Makara from Homestuck, a young boy isolated with a deep passion for what he loves, only to be met with ridicule and confusion, is content until his reality of parental abandonment, ill-fated coping mechanisms, and the sudden awareness that people never cared in the first place causes him to completely snap into a self-propelled prophecy of rage, violence, and ignorance. Irisu Kyoko from Irisu Syndrome. A quiet, lonely girl who has the only source of comfort in her life ripped from her and used as a means of manipulation and codependency via the only person who has ever given her the time of day. She wants everything to stop, to the point of creating a costume to best suit her and plan the end of her life through misguided revenge. Sabitsky, Dotflow, Yuri, Doki Doki Literature Club, Kurekyo Shinguji, Danganronpa V3, Killing Harmony. I could sit here and read my entire kin list to you, but for the sake of brevity, let's gather these reflections into a box and find their common denominator. Lonely, young, misguided people looking for something to call their own even at the cost of a happy life ahead of them. If nobody else will look out for them after all, their path must be carved in their own image. The world must warp to fit their truth, for it is the only truth they have ever had to hold on to. I learned about the term Denpa relatively recently. It kept popping up whenever I looked up Milk Outside fan art or merchandise, often paired up with characters like Saya from Song of Saya or Ame-chan from Needy Streamer Overload. It wasn't until I began watching video essays on eroge visual novels that Denpa and its surrounding culture really started to kick my passion for writing about the experience of playing games that are a bit too difficult to stomach for most people. Slowly, the attachment to these lonely, scared characters throughout my life began to make sense. I just needed Mamiya Takuji, aptly referred to as the Nagito Komaeda of eroge by a friend of mine, to start the conversation for me and put the feelings into words. Denpa, which translates literally to radio waves, originated from Kawamata Gunji, the culprit of the Fukugawa street murders in 1981. He claimed that radio waves told him to commit the crimes he inflicted, resulting in an insanity plea. In the mid-1990s, a slang colloquially known as Denpa-kai was formed amongst young Japanese people to refer to someone whom they saw as crazy, or more literally, someone who must be controlled by radio waves. Those subjected to the derogatory title were generalized, in fiction as well as real life, as people that saw themselves as outside of the world around them and those within it. Sometimes these beliefs simmered, resulting in shut-ins who feed into their self-made echo chambers and seldom step outside of them. Others, in contrast, may have been more extroverted about their beliefs, declaring their truths to anyone who passes by. Its usage, despite its unfortunate origins, has evolved over the years into the fictional subgenre known today as simply Denpa. While I had been exposed to the genre in small, notable ways throughout my life, as I explained above, it wasn't until mid-2025 that I took the plunge into visual novels. The Song of Saya confounded me so intensely that I finished it, unpatched, in less than 3 hours, and immediately started writing a long-winded, ABGN-esque essay about how much I thought it sucked. As I was writing that, I started Wonderful Every Day down the rabbit hole, which also irritated me for reasons I couldn't put into words beyond base-level, quote-unquote, academic critique on its structure. By the time I finished both and had plunged myself into Dead End Aegis, desperate to find out what I must have been missing, I was forced to slow down. Dead End Aegis' narrative and content was so jarring to me that I couldn't read it in more than short spurts every few days, and it was during those in-between periods that things slowly started to click into place for me. There's a unique sort of droning horror to experiencing dark, thought-provoking fiction. It forces you to sit and think about things that you would otherwise not want to, and to do this can often result in the adverse effect of reflecting upon the self. At some point, I stopped muttering under my breath about questionable plot structure and character writing and started wondering what lay beneath it. These characters going on about how warped their perspective is suddenly felt tangible and undeniably human. To recognize it was frightening because in many ways I saw parts of myself within the struggles. Recently, I read Mojika, Truth Rears Its Ugly Head. In its basest form, it's an incel revenge fantasy, an answer to the what if the bully kid fought back question cranked up to 50. The main character is reprehensible, abhorrent, and does terrible, awful things while firmly believing that he's in the right. It's horrifying, even violating, to be placed in the point of view of a deluded assaulter, and the narrative does not try to shy away from that fact. And yet, even as I watched the train barrel down the tracks towards the car that sat upon them, there was a humanity to the text that clenched at my chest. To be isolated, to be bullied, to stare at the ground for fear of judgment, and to form your own truth out of self-defense and fear, it resonated with me. Tanizaki Zuteru forces himself to look in the face of aggression, lies, and deceit every single day, and so he creates his own truth, one that feels so very tangible and desperate because it's all he's found to hold on to. Tanizaki Zuteru, Mamiya Takuji, Hitome Hirosuke. We are told that they are to be viewed with hesitation, caution, and that anything they do could cause despair to not only those they hurt, but to us, the viewer, as well. We are watching the so-called rampaging lunatic walking up and down the streets of Chicago from the safety of our phones, thinking to ourselves how lucky we are to be detached from such crazy people. We're not like them, we muse as we click the left mouse button to progress the dialogue or scroll upwards to the next reaction video in the queue. We sip our coffee, confident that the radio waves can't reach us from all the way over there. To connect with those that hurt, our pride must be exchanged for humility. The presumed ease of the connection, however, often colors the decisions made by those who have a spare hand to offer. The quote-unquote more mentally ill someone is, the easier it is to take off our headphones and stop listening. You can be depressed, but you can't be too depressed. You can have OCD, but you can't have too much OCD. It's okay if you're psychotic, because the person looking you up and down has informed you that they know lots of nice psychotics, so their favor towards you, albeit borrowed, is less of a stab to the chest and more of a scrape to the knee. Blood, sand, and cement mixed to form the mortar that we build our walls with. It matters not how much either of us is bleeding onto the ground, because the wall keeps it from being anybody's responsibility. A bandage, found in the pocket of another, can't breach stone no matter how many times it's pressed against it. What else can you do at the end of the day but give up the fight when someone has purposefully jammed your signals? There's something equally as comforting about Denpa as it is unsettling. To stare unflinchingly to the point of view of someone who has gone off the deep end, spiraled into their supposed perfect world, is inherently isolating as an act by itself. You can't just walk up to someone on the street and tell them you relate to Sakisaka Fuminori, because they not only probably won't know what you mean, but on the off chance that they do, the response would likely be hesitance at best. No, it's not about thinking that anime girls of ambiguous age are your savior and that falling into depravity is a great idea. It's about separation from the world, isolation of the self through chronic affliction that cannot be helped, and the desperation for anything to make you feel something aside from the pain, no matter how dubious. Eager consumption of depravity is found in the desperate, clawing grasp for release from what feels like an endless nightmare. After a point, to accept reality as something separate just feels cruel. Denpa, at least to me, is about closing your eyes and letting yourself fall. Not off of the school rooftop to the pavement below, but into the embrace of wriggling thoughts that whisper in your ear as you're falling asleep. If the world has shaped you into who you are now and refuses to hold out its hand when you cry, could it really blame you for trying to draw your own map? I could theoretically go on and on about mental health, perception, intrusive thoughts, and the ableism that still creeps into so many actions within our society. Several paragraphs about social treatment of terms akin to Denpa, like delulu, the intricacies of intrusive thoughts and their impact on fragile minds, or the Ouroboros that is internalized ableism and its feedback into the world we engage with, were all typed out and erased because, at the end of the day, this essay was supposed to be about why I resonate so heavily with the Denpa genre. Have I not also been frantically stacking bricks by writing all of this in between, fearful of being too much, too open, too pretentious? So many edits have been made to what was originally intended to be a seat-of-your-pants style piece, now on its 4th day of writing instead of its 1st, because I'm afraid. I'm afraid to look away from my laptop and into the sky, because as brilliant and blue as it looks in my peripheral vision, an eye may be staring down at me instead of the light of the sun. I'm afraid to return to a place that feels safe, because it may have never been real at all, orchestrated for my demise specifically when I firmly believed that I had somewhere I could call home. I'm afraid of the kind words of strangers and friends alike who read my work, because for every breath, every pronunciation, I will sit and endlessly wonder what it all means, if it's safe to take the hand offered to me, if they'll regret extending it at all. I see myself in so many characters who share one notable attribute: hurt people, desperate for comfort. The Denpa visual novel subgenre in particular takes that desperation and cranks it to 100, forcing you to ask yourself, forcing me to ask myself, what if? What if the mask was thrown to the floor, the pain could be released, and I laughed and laughed until my throat turned raw and my knuckles bled from punching the wall? What would I do afterward? Would I cover myself back up? Would I refuse to stop until my throat burned and the skin was stripped from my hands? Or would I stand up and go to the other room for a glass of water and a tube of ointment? My scars would remain, and my ability to speak would be altered for a few days at worst, but would wrapping gauze around my hand not prove, even in the smallest of ways, that there's always something that comes after? To hide or spiral is to distract, to look away, to drag my mortar-drenched hands over my face and plaster myself to the wall so that I don't have to think about what lies beyond it, or behind me, ever again. Seeing the what if within these dark, painful stories is, at least to me, a way to reflect, not only on myself, but to my response to kindness, as well as how I move forward from seemingly irreversible pain. It opens a path of inquiry, of speculation, as I watch characters fall from grace and have their friends reach out regardless, or on the other end, watching as friends and enemies alike turn away, leaving the protagonist to tend to their own festering wounds and have no choice but to believe that they're the only one who can patch themselves up. The barrier between myself and the parts of me that I try so desperately to set aside is not impenetrable, but at the end of it all, I'm the only one who can saw through the concrete and peer through the hole it leaves behind. I started rewatching Serial Experiments Lane. Maybe this time I'll remember why The Wired feels like home.